Hey folks, in today's video we're going to be discussing index match. Index match is one way to look up values in a spreadsheet program. This works in both Excel and Google Sheets. So index match is a forgiving way to look up values because you can look up uh, any value regardless of column and return a relative result. What we're going to touch on today is number one, how to write index match, and then we're going to deconstruct what's happening with index and match so that you have a base understanding of what's happening. So to begin, we have a range of data in columns A through F, and in cell I2, we have entered a name so that we can look up a country using index match. So what's happening in here is I am using index in order to identify my range of data, which is column A through F. And then I am nesting a match function in there so that I can look up a name relative to the values in column B, which is where all of my names are. And then I'm using the final argument of my index function in order to return the first column, which is the country name. So let's jump into how to write that in real time. So let's now add on top of that, and now we're going to look up our inventory. So we're going to begin by entering in the index function. So index and match are two unique functions, and we are going to nest our match function within index in order to get our desired result. So the first thing that we're going to enter in is going to be the reference argument within the index function. So this is asking for an array of cells to be offset into. What offset means is it merely is moving relative to the numbers that you enter in there. So for example, if we did index and then we entered in the number 2 for our row and the number 1 for our columns, you'll see that we're getting UK. That's because when we go down 2 rows, 1, 2, and we go 1 column, 1, we get UK. If we moved over 2 columns, we would get Gale. If we moved over 3 columns, we would get month. So what we're going to do is we're going to ignore those two things for now. And we are merely going to enter in our reference range, which is our entire set of data. And then we're going to enter in a comma, right? So you can see we're in reference. That's what this box is showing here. We're going to enter comma. I like to do a little line break because I find it easier to write, but you can do whatever you want to do. What I'm going to do now is use the match function. And this is where I'm going to enter in my search key. So for this example, I want to use name as my search key, right? So I'm going to want to enter in a name, one name, right? And you can see in the documentation, it's saying its examples are like you can do numbers, you can do names, or you can do a string object, which is letters and numbers together. But for our purposes, I just want to use a name. And in this case, I want to be able to enter my name into cell I2, which is a cell reference. So now that I have my reference in there, or my search key in there, I'm now going to select the range where this data is going to exist, right? So you can see in the range argument, it's calling for a one-dimensional array to be searched. That means you only want one column. For our example specifically, we want one column. So the way that we entered in A through F in index, we wouldn't want to do that because match would not be able to process that much information. It needs a single instance. So in this case, because we've selected to look up using name, we are going to select column B because that's where all of our names are. And then we have an optional argument in here, which enables us to tell match what we want to return. So 1 finds the largest value, less than or equal to the search key. That means if you have more than one instance of your search key, it will return the largest one. So if we were selecting country, for example, where we have multiple instances of UK, if we selected the number 1, it would likely return this result, row 4, because that is the maximum value in the range. For our purposes, we're going to enter in 0 because we want the exact match, right? We want Gale. We want to pull that in there. So now we're done with match, and you'll see that our index function has now we've now gone back into our index function, and we're going to add in a comma. And now you can see we're in the last optional argument in here. And now we want to enter in the column for the result that we want to return. So now we're going to go back to our data over here. We're going to reference this, and you can see we have 6 columns of data. So if we enter in number 1, you'll see that we're getting UK. If we enter in the number 2, we'll get Gale. If we enter in the column 3, we'll get the month. And then if we enter in column 4, you'll see we get that inventory. And that's the value that we want to return. So I'm going to hit enter, and now I'm returning my inventory, right? So that's how index match works. You reference a range of data in the index function, and then within match, you identify your lookup value, your lookup column, the optional argument of whether you want an exact match, the largest match, or the smallest match, and then you finally use the column that you want to look up. So let's dive a little bit deeper into what's happening here so that we can have a more foundational understanding of what index does, what match does, and then what happens when you nest match within index. So I'm going to use cell H7 in order to just enter in index by itself. So let's say that we just referenced our entire range of data, and then we enter in row 2 and column 1. That is going to return UK, right? Because we're looking at the entire range of data. We're looking at row 2, column 1. If we didn't define that and we just entered in A through F, you'll see that we just return the entire range of data, right? So what index is allowing you to do is effectively just have a more verbose cell reference, right? So if we did equal sign index row 2 column 1, that's the same thing as doing equals B1, or sorry, is the same as doing equals A2, right? Because effectively A represents column 1 and the 2 references row 2. So index is merely just identifying a point in your data set. Let's go into match now. What match enables you to do is enter in a search key and then look through an entire range, right? And then you get a number. So for example, let's look up Gale within our data set over here in column B, right? And then we're going to enter in the exact match, right? And before we entered in the exact match, check out what's happening here. It's when you enter in your search key in your range without identifying what search type you want to do, and it results to the largest value in here, it's returning the number 3, which is not correct, right? So the second that we add a comma in there and then we enter in 0, you'll see that we're getting the number 2, right? So what's happening in here is we are referencing the name Gale, and then we're looking it up against the column that it exists in, and then we're getting the number 2, right? So you can see Gale is at row 2. That's the index number over here, number 2. So when we nest Gale within index match, that's effectively what we're doing. We're telling the program that we want to index against our range in A through F, and then we want row number 2. And then when we enter in this column in here, it's telling it what column we want to reference within index match. So that's the same thing as us doing equal sign A through F, row 2, and then doing the number 4 over here. You'll see we're getting 32, which is the exact same thing as we're getting within our index match in here. The difference is we're using match in order to return the row that we want to find, right? So when we hard code in the number 2, we are doing the same thing as when we do a lookup or when we're doing a match for the name in a column, because it returns the number 2 for us. So for example, if we changed Gail to Rick, this number will turn to 4, and then this number will remain at column 4, so we'll get 11, right? So that's all that's happening here. Index match is effectively enabling you to dynamically reference the row number that you want to return. That's what the match portion of index match is doing. Index identifies the range, match identifies the row, and then the final value that you enter at the end, whether it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, represents the column that you want to return. Index match is effectively an instance of nesting functions within one another in order to get a desired result. Index match is very forgiving because you can reference the entire range of data, but when you're aware of other methods, such as nesting an array within a VLOOKUP, it's effectively doing the same thing as index match. But it all comes down to preference. I used index match very early on in my career because I enjoyed the ability to search an entire range regardless of where my lookup value is. However, as I advanced further down my data journey, I found that VLOOKUP opened up more avenues for automated solutions that cut down on the amount of clicks that I needed to maintain some data projects that I had underdone. If you're interested in looking at how to use VLOOKUP like this, I have a video that references how to use arrays in order to accomplish that. You can also accomplish it using query, which is the most powerful function in Google Sheets. I have another video that also talks about how to use that. So I would encourage you to check out my channel if you found this helpful and if you're looking for more information. I'm always interested in feedback, so please check out the comments section, and I hope you'll check out some of my other stuff.